This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchin Ford. Bird Culchin Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas, 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Bearcast on Sikkim 365 Radio and Sikkim365.com. I'm Craig Smoke, Sikkim 365 radio host, also team reporter, and joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, Director of Broadcasting, also team and recruiting reporter for Sikkim365.com. We come to you as the Baylor Bears are now 5-1 after a 45-20 victory, a dominant victory on Saturday at home in McLean Stadium. The Bears now 5-1 on the year. They are looking good in Big 12 play as well now at 3-1, and they are sitting one win away from bowl eligibility and perhaps a lot of other things as well. Point being, they're firmly in the mix at the halfway point of the season with this win, and now it is BYU, a non-conference game right here in the middle of the season, coming up this Saturday at Waco, and there's no shortage of tie-ins between this staff, whether it be the hirings this offseason by Dave Aranda or just the paths crossed over the years of coaching circles. But these will be two teams that have a lot of respect for each other coming up and should be a very physical football game. So we'll get into all that. We'll get into last week's game as well. But Grayson, first things first, how you feeling and how you feeling about the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, a great weekend, I would say. I mean, Baylor played their best game of the season. They looked really confident. And really just absolutely smashed West Virginia, a team that had given them a lot of problems over the past few years, and they came out and dominated them. And I was on the Big 12 teleconference and got to ask Neil Brown a question kind of about what he saw from Baylor, and he said, he became the coach in 2019. He said this was the best. This was the first time his offensive line got dominated to this extent. His defensive line, that is. So, I mean, that's just a credit to what Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes have done with this offensive line. Everyone obviously remembers 2019 when Darius Stills, said that Baylor was soft up front, and he made them look like that on that night, and he made them look like that last year. But last night, totally different story, or Saturday, totally different story. Baylor dominated up front. They protected Gary Bohannon. They ran the ball well. So, yeah, I mean, it was just overall a great night, and now you get to go into homecoming feeling pretty good about yourself, and you got a top 25 matchup coming up.
Yeah, and I guess you just looked in their underdogs heading into this weekend?
No, they're
favorites.
The
favorite okay.
It moved from – it opened at 1. -1, and now it's -6.
Okay,
so, I mean, there's a lot of money trending towards Baylor at this moment.
Well, I think there's reason for that. I mean, if you watched last weekend, you saw, not a great West Virginia team on the opposing sideline. We kind of knew that going in, but, still a team that if they hit on the right day, which teams can, then they could be very formidable. And the good news is that Baylor just never allowed them to do that. They punched the defense right in the mouth and punched the offense right in the mouth and never really looked back. It was a very impressive showing. So we'll get into the game itself, just kind of run down what happened, get into what came out of the game, and then look forward to BYU and get to your mailbag as well. But 3-1 now in Big 12 play, and you've got wins over West Virginia and Iowa State. Both those games at home, but this is a very home-friendly schedule. You've already also beat Kansas, and you do have the loss to Oklahoma State as your one blemish. But 5-1, I know Dave Aranda's not thinking about bowl eligibility, but pretty cool to know that they could reach that by game number 7 of the season. I mean, after going 2-7 last year, that'd be pretty neat to see them go ahead and lock that in and really just get another top 25 win. They could have 2 after the end of this weekend if they handle their business. But to get to this point, they had to handle their business against West Virginia, and it didn't take long for Jeff Grimes and the Baylor offense, a week removed from, some hand-wringing, some frustration. They looked terrible overall against Oklahoma State. I think that's fair to say. They just didn't look like a good product, and a lot of that had to do with the Cowboys' defense. But we knew coming in against West Virginia it was another very good defense, especially up front. And to be able to eventually run the football and move your offense up and down the field, Gary Bohannon was going to have a good day throwing the football. And Grayson, it took all of 2 plays for them to do exactly what they had to do to keep WVU on their heels. He connects with Tyquan Thornton from 75 yards out, and boom, just like that, Baylor's on the board, and they've hit the deep ball, and now West Virginia's going, okay, we're focused on the run, but now we got to worry about Tyquan Thornton and, whatever else. But, yeah, just 2 plays, boom, 75 yards and a touchdown, and that was a beautiful way to start the game.
Yeah, and I mean, we mentioned this going into the game that Gary was going to have to play well and that they were going to have opportunities, which, frankly, they had so many opportunities on Saturday. I mean, there were guys – I mean, yes, Gary played really well. He did, but the scheme that Baylor drew up and the simple fact of the matter, their athletes they looked far superior than West Virginia did. And a lot of Gary's throws were to wide open guys, especially some of his touchdowns, and he was on the money with those throws. Neil Brown mentioned that play specifically on the teleconference and said, we were completely out of position. Like that they were aligned just too far to the middle or too far outside, and he sliced them right into the middle. And this is one of those plays that's very underrated about Gary Bohannon, but if Charlie Brewer makes that throw, Tyquan Thornton is tackled. But the ball got there so quickly that allowed Tyquan to catch the ball and then get upfield. It's that arm strength. It's just those little things that, casual football fans might not see. But to see it on full display there, I mean, the way he was able to split the D, and honestly, that's one of the first times we've gotten to see Tyquan just turn on the jets. So much fun to watch. That guy is so fast, so good to see him get into the open field and get started on what would be a massive game for Tyquan Thornton.
Yeah, had his best game as a Baylor Bear, I don't think without any question. So West Virginia got the ball back, and there is one bugaboo with this team. They have now given up opening drive touchdowns 3 straight weeks. And they've made it look really easy, too. Like, that's the thing, is that these have just been, like, offenses grabbing the ball right out of the gates and just driving it down the field on them and scoring. And, you went from, oh, man, big, huge play with Tyquan to, like, okay, now it's 7-7, minutes later. But it was okay because that feeling wouldn't last very long. This game was over pretty quickly. But West Virginia did have, a nice 75-play drive. The big connection was a 53-yard play to Sam James. That didn't quite go the distance, but Dagey did connect with Sean Ryan for a 12-yard touchdown, and it was 7-7. And Aranda doesn't seem to be really pressed by the defense giving up the early points again. It's an issue. It's something they're looking at. It's not like something, though, he's like freaking out about just yet, but it is a thing that's becoming somewhat of a habit. And in particular, the phases of the game that you really look at is crucial, and he's now brought this up on a couple of occasions. The first part of the game, they're regularly giving up opening drive touchdowns. The ending of the first half and the opening of the second half, and the ending of the first half, they've been giving up points there towards the end, and they did again with West Virginia kicking a field goal with about 4 minutes left. The start of the second half, and then the end of games. Like, those are the 4 phases, beginning, end, and then the 2 middles. And those beginnings have been a little rocky for them in terms of giving up the opening drive touchdowns. And the other phases have sort of been that way as well. And that's really where all of West Virginia points came, were in those areas. The rest of the big portion of the game, really, they didn't give up anything. But it was just those little spots where little points here and there. So that's something they're still working on a bit.
Yeah, 3 straight games they've given up an opening drive touchdown to the opposing offense. And it's been big plays. I mean, Jalen Warren had the big 30-yard run on, like, the first play of the game there. West Virginia comes out, and like you said, Sam James. And underrated play, but J.T. Woods tracking him down, not allowing him to score a touchdown. That was nice to see.
It was. That was a big play.
And it gave Baylor an opportunity to get a stop. And to be honest, West Virginia got lucky because Christian Morgan tipped that ball. Yep. And, Jalen Petrie got caught up in the legs of Jared Dagey, so he wasn't able to get a ton on it. I mean, if Morgan's able to just bat that a little bit more left or straight up or just anywhere, that ball's probably intercepted going the other way, or at least it's 3rd and 10, but instead, of course, it falls right into Sean Ryan's hands.
Yep, so they score. Morgan could have had an interception or at least created one, but oh well. It's kind of one of those things where you go, all right, well, that could have been a 7-0 lead and the ball back, but now it's 7-7, so let's see how it plays out. Well, it didn't take long for it to play out. Baylor scores again. 75-yard drive. The big play on this one was another Tyquan Thornton pass, a big gainer from him for 44 yards. And eventually Ben Sims caps off the drive with a touchdown, his first of 2 on the day. And by the end of the day, he would be tied for the Baylor touchdown record for most scores by a tight end. So he will break that with just one more score And he's got 6 and most likely 7 games to do that.
Yeah, touchdown machine, and I will officially say, yes, Baylor does throw the ball to the tight ends because they have a really good one, finally.
Yeah,
they have not had a really good one. And Ben Sims is a really good one. You knew as a recruit he could come in and be an accomplished guy as a wide receiver, had to get better as a blocker, and he's showing that this year. I've been really impressed by him. They ran a lot of 2 tight end sets in this game with he and Dabney. And that's how Ben actually got open on the later touchdown. But, yeah, he's been a very big part of their offense. And, once again, he was just wide open in the end zone. I mean, Gary almost missed him because he was so wide open. He just kind of had to float it over there to him. But, yeah, another great drive. They ran the ball some, hit the big play to Tyquan. Great drive by the Bears to answer.
And then they start creating separations. West Virginia would get the ball back, and just a handful of plays later, Daggy does what Daggy does. He gets intercepted. And the Bears take over with the interception. Was it Jalen Petrie with the interception? And they turn that into a 48-yard touchdown drive to make it 21-7, and basically no looking back from there. Gary Bohannon with a couple of passes, including to Estrada and Thornton, as Thornton was involved throughout the game. And then towards the end, they were really trying to get him like over the 200-yard mark. It was so obvious. They kept throwing to him and just couldn't connect it. But they did hit him again on this drive, and Bohannon eventually runs it in himself. It's 21-7. And, I'll rifle through some of these other series, not just, be super tedious. But that was like the first wave of the game. That was the first, quarter. Basically, West Virginia would get a punt. They'd exchange punts to end the first quarter, actually, and that was how that would come to a close. But 21-7. I think everybody was feeling good about where they stood at that point.
Yeah, the defense had played well, and I think you kind of got. I mean, just being fair, Jarrett Daggy is the perfect quarterback that this Baylor defense wants to play against. I mean, he's turnover prone. He's a statue in the pocket. Baylor made him suffer. They were hitting him a ton. I felt bad for the dude. They couldn't run the ball. I mean, this was just a perfect setup for the Baylor defense against a quarterback like that. And that's why I was surprised Neil Brown didn't go to Garrett Green earlier. I mean, I know Garrett can't throw the ball much at all, but at least he gave them something in the run game. But, yeah, the Baylor defense was suffocating in that first quarter, besides, of course, that opening drive.
Yeah, and there was also the roughing the punter penalty on A.J. McCarty. That looked like it could have been a bad penalty at the time and just not something you wanted to do to give them a little bit of room. Didn't turn into anything but a punt plays later, but still, that was just a play. Don't do that again, please, because against a better team, that could end up costing you. But, yeah, they would just basically exchange punts for the next 3 series, and Baylor would finally score again. A roughing the passer play, not a roughing the passer play. Baylor would score again, a 5-play, 86-yard drive. And, again, it was Tyquan Thornton, 11 yards from Gary Bohannon, his second touchdown on the day. And, he was all over the place. He was just very active, and, again, by far his best game as a Baylor Bear. He's had other games that have come, like he's had 1 or 2 other games, and one in particular I'm thinking of where he was, like, somewhat close in receiving yards, but this was his best game. It's not even
for sure
comparable.
He was awesome in this one. And 2 comments on this drive. Drew Estrada, the 58-yard catch. Yes. He's a problem.
We're seeing why they wanted him and why they got him and why they felt really good about what he would bring to the table. He's a very nice option to have and a nice departure from just the typical targets.
Right, and he showed this on his film at Dartmouth, and I wasn't sure if it would translate the speed, but it is. I mean, he's getting by defenders, and then he's also pretty reliable. You know what I mean? As a guy who just catches the ball really cleanly. And he had a big, I think West Virginia tried to kick an onside kick, and he was actually the guy who was able to recover it. So he made a couple big plays. And on the Tyquan touchdown, I don't know about you, I didn't think they were going to keep that as a touchdown, but it worked out.
It did. Yeah, I didn't either. That was a curious little moment, but they did, and so it was 28-7 at that point, and they were rolling. West Virginia would add a field goal. And then you had an exchange of 3 series of punts, and that was the end of the first half. That field goal coming with a little less than 5 minutes to go. That was like their late half score or what have you that Dave Aranda kind of talks about. So, again, their opening drive and then their next to last drive the second half, that was all they mustered. 28-10 was your halftime score, and I think everybody was pretty sure that this was going to result in a win, and really it was just the writing on the wall in the second half for this football team.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw, or I mentioned this last week, West Virginia, over 20 points one time in their last 5 Big 12 games, now one time in their last 6 Big 12 games. Once Baylor got to 28 points. I hate saying this because, anomalies can happen or changes in kind of what we know about teams can happen. But I felt like this game was over when it was 28. When they scored 28 points, I mean, it's like West Virginia ain't scoring 28 points today.
Yeah, no, I was not concerned about a comeback really at all, and that was something that we didn't have to wait long on either. West Virginia would kick a field goal to start the second half. Again, those little phases of the game. That's where that's where all their points were scored. It was the 2 columns of the halftime and then the very end of the game as well. I mean, not quite the last drive, but it was like the next to last drive before halftime, next to last drive before the end of the game when Garrett Green scored.
Right, and that drive was ugly.
Yeah.
The first drive of they held them to a field goal, which was great, but they were getting gashed. I mean, they were giving up all kinds of receptions. That was just a weird drive to start the half.
Jarrett Dagey was throwing it all over. Letty Brown was running over, getting yardage, and it only results in a field goal, though. This team really does bow up its neck in the red zone, and that's why you see them have so much confidence in this group, but they do surrender the field goal. So at that point, 28-13, and then it was really over. Then it was over. Once they scored the touchdown, 3-play, 47-yard drive, 33 seconds. Gary Bohannon with the pass to Ben Sims, his second touchdown. This one from 29. He only had 2 catches, but both of them were scores. And at that point, it was 35-13 Baylor. And been saying it, but this game really was over. Like, there was no question. West Virginia was not going to stop them the rest of the game. They were definitely not going to let West Virginia score over and over. If anything, they were only going to relent field goals, which they were more than happy to do that. And they allowed West Virginia to kind of dink and dunk, but they never, gave up the big play. I mean, Sam James had that big catch early, but, I mean, they never had the Tyquan Thornton type play. They never had the 75-yard bomb and then, followed it up. It was just very herky-jerky and mostly punts and, and then resorting to a lot of field goals.
Yeah, they didn't have the, 97-yard Sean Ryan touchdown they had in 2019, if you remember that. In the second half, look at all the possessions for West Virginia. 5 plays, 3 plays, 3 plays. They did have the touchdown drive, but, it was utter dominance by the Baylor defense in the second half. It was over.
Yeah, it was. Done. So let's roll through here. I won't even go series by series. It was 35-13. Baylor would score again a few plays later as Abram Smith, they're passing and passing and passing. They were getting little runs here and there, but, this was like the exclamation point of, we just broke your neck, and that gets game over. Abram Smith bursts through 31 yards. The run hits him, and now it's just it was beautiful to watch. It was just beautiful to watch them dissect that West Virginia defense.
And a few plays earlier, he had a 20-yard run that he barely got tripped up. Yep. He was gone if he hadn't gotten tripped, and then, of course, they give him the ball right back, and he goes ahead and hits the long run. So, Abram played well. He continues to impress me. His power, speed combination's really good, and a lot of people had concerns about the run game after this game, and I was sitting there going...
After this game?
Yeah.
They're crazy.
I got tons of questions in the chat about, when's our run game going to come back? And I'm sitting there going, guys, you got to remember, this is a top 15 run defense, and they ran for 5.3 yards per carry.
Yeah.
They really were efficient in this game, and I felt like this was a complete performance. And, yes, they attacked them through the air because that's where West Virginia is susceptible, but they also ran on them and ran well on them, and Abram was a huge part of that.
Yeah, and they ran on them and were able to eventually break through a play like this because of all the passing. I don't know what you people are wanting. There's 170 yards rushing against a really stingy West Virginia team, and quite frankly, didn't need 200 yards because they could pass all over them. Who cares how I got done?
Yeah.
I was the complete opposite. I was thrilled with the offense after this game. I thought that they had the perfect game plan. I thought the way that they started the game, the way that they just kept pounding on West Virginia and kept going after them and breaking plays. I loved what they did offensively in this game, and if anything, it made me more confident, not less confident, in the run game and everything else for that matter.
For sure. I think some people were like, why aren't they running for 360 yards
God,
like they were against Texas Southern? And it's just game scripts are going to kind of hinder certain aspects of your game. And if you go back and watch, the Iowa State game and the Oklahoma State game, they did not run the ball great in those two games, particularly the second half against Iowa State. So to see them finally have success against a quality run defense was great to see, and it bodes well because I think these are probably the three, maybe two out of the three are the two best run defenses they're going to face this season. I'd almost say they might be the three best run defenses they're going to play the rest of the year, at least how the season is trending.
Probably in there too.
I mean, yeah, but what Bijan have?
Yeah, I mean, he had some good yardage, but they're still a good defense. They won that game because of their defense.
Right, at the end. You're right. And they would be the ones that I was kind of thinking of as the other run defense in the conference. But, like, TCU's gotten gashed. Texas got ran over in the second half. So, yeah, it's just interesting to see them improve and progress.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't pass very well against those other teams. I mean, when you really think about it, they didn't do a whole lot outside of like a half here or half there. This was a complete four-quarter, like, do whatever you feel like doing type of a performance. So, yeah, I mean, to each their, I don't think anybody's probably upset about it, but, you know, they'll run for 300 against somebody else, you know. Anyways, Baylor.
Wait till they play Tech.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, that's the game they'll run for 300, not West Virginia. I mean, West Virginia, the whole goal was to pass on them so you could eventually break through with Abram Smith later on. So that's what I mean by the exclamation point. But Baylor would tack on another set of points, which was just nice to see. It was a good drive that you know, was 9 plays, 48 yards, but ended up having to result in a field goal. And that was fine because they were up big, and it was a good opportunity for them to work on some special teams. And how about a 45-yarder from Isaiah Hankins? As I said on Twitter on Saturday, do not take that for granted. They didn't really even need to have it, but it was good to have it. So 48-13, and then eventually Garrett Green would score late, and that was West Virginia's final score in their next-to-last drive. And he can scoot, he can run really quick, and he's not really that capable of a passer, so you see why he's not necessarily the starter. Although it would be interesting – at the same time, though, he'd be very predictable very quickly, which is probably why he's not the starter. But he's a nice wrinkle to throw him in there and let him run around a little bit, and he can be dangerous in that way. But too little, too late, too all for naught, and Baylor wins big, 45-20. So, yeah, it's a really complete performance. And as we mentioned, you know, Tyquan Thornton had his best performance as a Bear with 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. They were really trying to get him to 200 at the end. I mean, I felt like there was like 5 consecutive passes that felt like were incompletions that were straight to him. But he ends up with 187, 171 yards. I mean, Abram Smith almost cracked 100, which is – I'll take that. If you had told me that going into the West Virginia game, Gary Bohannon, easily his best game statistically. First 300-yard game, first 4-touchdown game passing. Ended up with 5 total because he also had the run. So 336 and 4 TDs, 5 really for Gary. And Estrada was great. Sims, obviously, with the 2 touchdowns. Tay McWilliams even coming in the game late. I thought he was going to break one. He comes in, man. He is trying to get a touchdown every single time, dude. If you sleep for 1 second on Tay McWilliams when it's garbage time, you will get scored on if you're not careful because he was running hard. And I thought he was about to break one at one point, and I was like, man, that would have been awesome. But I love watching him come in there like that. So we even got to see some reserves there by the end of it. And so, yeah, just an all-around, I think, very good bounce-back win considering what we were talking about a week ago after the Oklahoma State game. This was a thorough tail-kicking, and they showed a lot of things that they needed to show, not only for the fans out there watching, but for themselves, I think, because there was a lot of looking in the mirror and kind of self-evaluation after Oklahoma State, and it's clear, Dave Aranda got up on that podium and said, we're going to, change some things or work on some things, and well, he's a man of his word because they clearly worked on some things. That was night and day from Oklahoma State. And I know the Cowboys had something to do with it, but still, that was nothing to sneeze at because West Virginia is not one of the best teams in the Big 12. But they do have a defense that can be good, and Baylor didn't even give them a chance to be in this game, which just made it as one-sided as it was.
Yeah, I don't think West Virginia's making a bowl this year.
No,
they
probably
have a really tough schedule upcoming, obviously, with the Big 12. They still have Kansas, so they're definitely getting to 3 wins.
But I think that's like the last game, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
and it's on the road.
They have like a 0-4, 0-5 staring them in the face before they get to Kansas. But you're right, yeah, they're now in trouble as far as making a bowl game. They're going to have to upset 2 or 3 teams to be able to make one. And I don't know where the temperature gauge is on Neil Brown. I know we certainly have talked to West Virginia fans who are kind of frustrated, obviously, and feel like he's had more than enough time now to be better. And I don't know how extreme some of them may get as far as like wanting him gone, or even what the West Virginia administration thinks. But I was expecting them to be a bit further along at this point. I think the Jarrett Dagey thing's really been a weight around their neck, and not necessarily blaming him entirely, but it's just like the whole offense is just, it's just in a funk, man. The O-line's not any good. Quarterbacks are average at best. Receivers are okay, but just nothing consistent enough to really be all that fearful of. No run game. I mean,
no run game at all. They haven't had a run game since Neil Brown's been there. But and their defense isn't elite this year. It's good. It's not elite like it has been.
But as Baylor showed, you pop that top off, and that front is not nearly as nasty as it can be.
Because their secondary is so vulnerable. Yep. I mean, and they were coming into this matchup. We saw Texas Tech took advantage of that, and Baylor did the same thing, just even more efficiently. Yep. And so, West Virginia's. They're in trouble. As far as Baylor goes, though, I mean, Ebner, 8 for 53, and Abram, 11 for 87. Their two lead backs really getting the job done efficiency-wise in this game. Was really impressed with them. Yeah, I mean, Taekwon, great. Ben Sims, Drew Estrada, awesome. RJ Sneed. So I got a lot of questions about RJ Sneed this week as well. Just asking, why is he not more involved in the offense? Why is he kind of the odd man out now with Drew Estrada back? And I would say, so there's two lines of thinking. First of all, Gary missed him twice on what would have been really long plays. I don't know if you remember, he had a rollout on a bootleg, and he threw it and it got batted down. If that ball doesn't get batted down, I mean, RJ had probably a 30-yard gain there. So that's part of it. I would also say one thing that we're learning a little bit, or at least I'm learning even more so about this offense, and it was similar at BYU, this team likes to throw the ball deep, or they like to throw the ball to the sideline. They do not really attack the middle of the field that much. They do some, but it's not to the same level as they do the other two spots. They love Gary throwing it horizontal to his receivers, getting 5, 6, 7, 8-yard gains. They like taking the top off the defense, and they like running the football. And that's been kind of what I've seen from them. And really the most risky throws Gary has thrown all year have been balls that are over the middle of the field. And so it's just very curious to me how they're going to correct that going forward. But I do think the bootlegs are where you're going to see RJ probably have his biggest impact in this offense. And I do think it will come because I think teams will start to either take away the deep ball or take away those short passes kind of to the sidelines and force them to throw it across the middle. And that's where I think RJ is going to be extremely valuable moving forward. So, yes, he's had a couple slow games, but I think they will get him going eventually. He's too talented to not have a bigger impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little off-kilter. You could say, though, like everybody was off-kilter 2 weeks ago, I mean, for the most part. Yeah. And then this week.
Except Drew.
Except for Drew Estrada. But, I mean, just the offense as a whole was out of whack. And, then this past week, I mean, yeah, at least he caught a ball this week. It's better than getting shut out entirely. But, yeah, I mean, I noticed he was not as involved. But at the same time, like, something's got to give when Taekwon's going for nearly 200 and Estrada's going for nearly 100 again. And, then the running game's adding in. And
Ben Sims has 2 touchdowns.
Ben Sims has 2 scores. So, like, I mean, there's only one football, right? Yeah. And so, somebody's got to give. And that's been RJ at least the last couple of weeks, or at least last week, to the biggest extent. But I think he'll be fine. I think you're right that it'll just be a matter of other things having to open up. And, now if you're BYU, I mean, what are you looking at? You pop on that Baylor tape and you're 2 plays in, and there's Taekwon Thornton streaking for 75. So they're gonna be looking at that, and then they're gonna look at Abram Smith and go, geez. And then they're gonna look at Ben Sims, and they're gonna look at Drew Estrada, and they're only gonna have so many guys. And then there's the opportunity right there for an RJ Sneed, or maybe they see RJ Sneed on that tape, and even though he didn't have big stats, they go, like, that's the guy that we need to keep an eye on. Well, guess what? That opens it up, and so on and so forth. And so as long as everybody's doing their job, there's going to be room for scoring in this Jeff Grimes RVO, which I love watching so far.
Yeah, the scheme looks great, and it looked fantastic on Saturday. I do want to give a couple shout-outs on defense. Terrell Bernard, man, he looked good. He looked good coming off that injury. I know everyone was nervous about that, and frankly, he hadn't looked great all year. He looked okay, but not to the level that we've seen Terrell Bernard in the past. In this game, he looked much closer to 2019 Terrell Bernard.
He looked healthy.
2020, yeah.
He got the sack, yeah.
And he looked good. He was being disruptive as well. He's getting into the backfield, missed a tackle or two, which, again, is a product of him still working his way back, still getting back to that elite level. But 9 tackles and a sack. Great to see that from him. Siaki Ika finally had those moments where you go, Siaki Ika. He finally had those moments where you go, oh, this is him being disruptive, because he had the sacks. And obviously in Dave Aranda's defense, his primary goal is as a run stuffer and as a guy who takes on defense linemen and allows linebackers to get through. But he finally was winning one-on-one battles and winning them handedly. He had 2 sacks in the game. TJ Franklin had a really nice sack. He was very active in this game. Happy to see that out of TJ. Gabe Hall played well. Victor Obi had that sack later in the game. And, of course, Garmin Randolph, who continues to get better and better each week. This defense was awesome. They played really, really well on Saturday, and they're going to need to play really, really well if they're going to win this weekend.
Yeah, 6 sacks, interception, and didn't really give up anything in the run game, and just gave up a couple of plays really in the passing game, but they were more than happy to give up some of what they gave up in order to just keep West Virginia out of the end zone, which they did pretty much all day long except for the first drive and the next to last drive. And then, in between, all there was a couple field goals, and that was it. So you'll take that all day, every day against whoever you play this year. 20 points against anybody, you'll be like, yep, let's take that. We'll take that. We'll probably win that game, because I don't think there's a bunch of teams that are going to keep them below 20. So if you can play defense that way. And look, West Virginia's offense, again, is not very good. But Baylor did what they – if you're playing a bad team, dominate a bad team and make them look like a bad team and make it to where people go, well, yeah, that was just so-and-so. But you know what? You did your job, and move on to the next one. And that's what they did, I felt like.
Well, and they don't lose like this. West Virginia does not lose like this.
No, they've been close in every single game this year. Every single game they've been close.
So Baylor was awesome on Saturday.
Yeah, they were.
And honestly – frankly, they should have been ranked this week. That's another discussion, but that's absolutely ridiculous that they're not ranked. And you're looking at receiving votes. Auburn gets votes for losing by 24 points to Georgia because they scored a touchdown on Georgia. That's somehow impressive.
No, I get that, but last time Baylor got ranked, they lost their very next game. So
I know, but the team they lost to is a top 12 team.
I get that, but I'm just wondering. I don't really care about rankings, but I know they do matter ultimately. But last time, like I said, they got in, they turned around, and got whooped by Oklahoma State. So they go win this weekend. There's not going to be any doubts about them being top 25. There will not even be a question about it if they beat BYU. That would be a top 25 win. They'd be 6-1. There's not an argument against it. That would be a true travesty. So, yeah, there's an argument for them this week. There would be nothing but an argument for them next week if they win this game. So that's what they need to go out and do, is beat BYU and not leave the voters any room for an alternative. But, I understand where you're coming from on that. So, yeah, the defense played really well. Offensive line was brilliant. Thought they played a really great game in terms of protecting Gary and giving him time. You had a unit coming in West Virginia, had 45 tackles for loss on the year. They gave up 3 on the day. None of those were sacks. So just a huge, and obviously plenty of time for Gary to look on the field and make the throws that he needed to make. So just, well done all across the board, even special teams once again. Consistent touchbacks, 45-yard field goal, not much in the way of returns, but that was fine. Just an all-around great effort. So now it's on to BYU, Grayson, and this is a very good team. Kalani Sitake's group was undefeated until last week, got beat by Boise State, and that's a shame because they would have been top 10 coming into this week. And you talk about rankings. They would have been firmly there in the top 10, and instead they're now more top 20-ish, and really kind of having to hold on to that now as they enter into the game against the Bears this weekend. So big opportunity for both. A program that's blue-collar and tough, physical. Also, like I mentioned, was undefeated up until last week. They've got their quarterback, who's more of their dynamic guy, who's back as of last week. But they also have a kid by the name of Baylor Romney, who is their backup, who's played a ton. So they have a couple guys they could rely on if they need to. Tyler Algier, their running back's a freaking stud. There's a real deal team rolling into Waco this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And one of their biggest wide receiver options is Baylor's brother, Gunnar Romney. So yeah, there's a lot of good kind of quality players on this BYU team, and they're used to winning. Frankly, they've been winning ever since last year, and they've carried that into this year until they ran to a Boise State team who is actually pretty good. Boise State pushed Oklahoma State to the limit, probably should have won that game. They played against Nevada who has Carson Strong, probably going to be one of the top quarterbacks taken in the NFL draft. They lost to him, but other than that, they've been really good, have some big wins on their resume. And of course, now this BYU win for them, like you said, unfortunate. BYU was going to be top 10. BYU was going to be the favorite, probably by a few points against Baylor coming into this game, which I would have loved to have seen Baylor kind of with BYU as the favorite. I would have definitely taken the points there for Baylor, but not going to happen. Baylor's going to be the favorite coming into this game. BYU's going to be upset about the loss. BYU's going to come in and play really hard. And like you said, Tyler Algier, he's the 10th in the nation in rushing yards, but he had a tough game this weekend against Boise State, 19 carries for 73 yards. So they're going to be trying to get that corrected as well. But yeah, this is a very interesting matchup to me because BYU is not a great run defense. They're 52nd in the nation in run defense. They give up 129.5 yards per game. The last 3 opponents Baylor has played have all been inside the top 20 in run defense. So there should be more room to run for this Baylor defense or Baylor offense. Abram Smith, Treston Ebner should have a field day per se against this defense compared to the ones that they've faced. And then on the flip side, BYU's given up 238 passing yards per game. And that is after they only gave up 172 yards this weekend. So they're 82nd in the nation, but they were really giving up a ton more until they played Boise State over the weekend. So again, I think Gary Bohannon's going to have a lot of opportunities to throw the football. I think Jeff Grimes can open up the playbook even more in this game because I think they should be able to run the football as well as pass it. And yeah, I think the offense is set up really, really well to have a fantastic day.
Yeah, I'm expecting the Bears to win this game. I am. I think even without the loss last week, I was going to roll with Baylor in this game, but even more so now, even though you would think that actually would up BYU's chances in some ways because of the whole bounce back theory. But it was fascinating to listen to Aranda get into some of the connections with this grouping of two staffs. I mean, for one, he's known Kalani Sitake a long time, but he's known their assistant head coach going back to when he first started coaching. When he was at Redlands High School, he was crossing paths with BYU's associate head coach. There's obviously 3 coaches on the Baylor staff that a year ago were on BYU staff. You've got 2 of the main reasons why this offense is fun to watch again, with Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos, not to mention quality control coach and Matt Mitchell as well. Ron Roberts was with Dave Aranda when they were at Delton State and crossed paths with the same associate head coach when he was elsewhere. And I could go on and on. There's so many different ways these 2 staffs have crossed paths. And, even BYU's familiarity with Apu. I mean, there was a guy that they knew really well, and they recruited. They were his first offer. They know his family and all that, and you could hear the bummer in Sitake's voice when he was talking about not landing Apu when we talked to him on the show yesterday. So I think that's I think the best part, and I mentioned this in my article today, is I know for a fact Baylor's not going to be coming into this game unprepared or unfocused. They are going to be, if anything, laser focused and on edge in a good way, because I think of the respect factor. I think that Grimes and Mateos and Mitchell and just Aranda's experiences. I mean, he's played BYU a ton, and pretty much everywhere he's been, he's played them at some point. So I'm expecting a team to not be coming on off of a win that looked nice and go, oh, well, we're at home again. No, they're going to be knowing that a fight's coming.
Yeah, and honestly, looking at BYU's schedule up to this point, I'm not that impressed with who they've played. I mean, Arizona is a winless team. They're not good. Utah, they played them with Charlie Brewer, and they are clearly a much worse team with Charlie Brewer than with Cam Rising now. Arizona State, that's their best win. The 10-point win over Arizona State. But other than that, I mean, we're talking close games. They beat Arizona by 8. They beat Utah by 9. They beat Arizona State by 10. South Florida, they beat by just 8 points. Utah State, they beat by 14, and then the loss to Boise State. Just not really impressed with their schedule and kind of what they've done so far this year, their body of work. I feel like Baylor's actually been tested more than BYU up to this point with the Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia game. So interesting to see that. I'm also very interested to see kind of what BYU does do at the quarterback position, because Jaron Hall didn't play very great last week, but he wasn't horrible either. But he's more of the dual threat. He's actually the one that I think would be probably more effective against Baylor than Baylor would be. Baylor Romney, that is. But Jaron Hall, 863 yards, 8 touchdowns, 3 picks, completing nearly 60% of his passes. But he also has 163 yards on the ground. Tyler Algier, 121 carries, 642 yards, 8 touchdowns, also 11 catches out of the backfield. So those are kind of the running back, quarterback guys to watch. And then at receiver, they got some interesting names. Gunnar Romney, he's a very good player. Isaac Rex, one who Jeff Grimes recruited, and obviously Isaac had a fantastic freshman year, and he's got 3 touchdowns this year, so a very big red zone threat. And then Neil Powell is another really good wide receiver for them, 26 receptions, 331 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So they have experience at wide receiver, lots of options at wide receiver, and I think they're going to have some success against Baylor on the offensive side.
Yeah, I'm sure that they will. I mean, I'm sure Algier will find some running room, but, whether or not they are overrated or as tested as Baylor or whatever, I just like the fact that I know that there's not going to be a letdown and some kind of comfort level achieved because you're 5-1. Like, there's no concern about this team getting a big head. There's no concern about this team losing focus, and that's really my point. So I don't think it would matter if it was BYU rolling in or if it was like Oklahoma. Like, this team after that win last week was going to be feeling pretty good, but you add in all of that familiarity, and there's just no chance that they're not going to be ready for at least the physicality and like the relentlessness and the kind of the fight that BYU is going to bring. Now, if their talent level just is able to blow that out of the water right away, great. But if they do get into a fight, I think they're going to be walking in expecting a fight. So that's good. I'm just glad that they're going to be, prepared, locked in going in.
Yeah, and Baylor is 9-1 in their last 10 homecoming games.
Yep.
So I think that's a big stat as well. They clearly get up for the homecoming games and have played pretty well in those. And so, yeah, I mean, they're going to get tested, no doubt. BYU is a physical football team. They run the ball well. And, I mean, they're just well coached. I mean, that's kind of the main takeaway here. But on the flip side, they're not as good as Iowa State. They're not as good as Oklahoma State. And when you think about those two matchups, Baylor was able to do some things against both of those who were much more elite level defenses than this BYU team. I think this BYU defense is actually more similar to West Virginia, except with a worse run defense and maybe around the same pass defense, which means Baylor's offense should be really happy with the matchup they're about to see.
Well, should be fun this weekend. You want to get anything else before we get in the mailbag?
Nothing too crazy to bring up. I do want to mention turnover margin because we've talked about that a few times. BYU's 17th in the nation. Baylor's 8th. So both teams do a really good job in that regard. And then penalties. Baylor is still 103rd in the nation in penalty yards per game. BYU is 54th. So those two areas could be something to watch going into this game. And penalties and turnovers always matter, but in this one, those penalties could be really costly for Baylor. And turnover margin, it should be interesting because something's got to give there. But outside of that, I mean, it's going to be really fun. It's homecoming. Excited to see the crowd. I think this is going to be the best crowd that Baylor has had this season, maybe even better than the Iowa State game. And I also think this is going to be the best recruiting weekend Baylor will have had up to this point. They're going to have a lot of really, really good prospects on campus. Most of the commits will be showing up. I mean, Kyan Roberts-Day is coming all the way from Missouri, so this is his first game of the year that he'll be in attendance for. Lots of 2023 prospects. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think Saturday's going to be one of those days where Baylor's like, we have to have our team ready, and they will be. I think this team's going to be ready to go. The environment should be really crazy. And 2:30 kickoff on ESPN, you really can't think of anything better for a homecoming matchup.
Oh, well, I'm sure somebody will find a way.
I'm sure. Why aren't we night game or whatever? And it's like homecoming's never a night game.
Sky's the wrong color blue for me to leave the house today or whatever. Like, I don't even want to start there. But, I think, last week was a hot one, and this one should be really nice. There really should be no excuses, but I'm sure someone somewhere will find a reason why. But I am expecting a good crowd. All right, so let's get into some of the questions we have this week. Scotty B. the Baylor King, what ways is BYU's defense similar to teams that Baylor has played up to this point? You just mentioned they're similar to West Virginia in your eyes.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's just they don't have the run defense that West Virginia had up to that point in the season. And, as far as the passing yards, they give up a ton of yards. But one thing I will say, I think they're going to play better than West Virginia did. I don't think they're going to give up as many big plays, explosive plays, as West Virginia did in that game. I think they're well coached, which is going to make them more similar to Iowa State in the coaching perspective. But they just don't get it done on the field as consistently. I really think you're going to see them kind of put up similar numbers to what they did against West Virginia, except they'll have the starters in for the whole game.
And probably do more of it with the run.
Yeah, I think they'll be better in the run game, and play action will still be there, though, for Gary to take advantage. So, yeah, I mean, they're not super similar, though, schematically in what they do to anyone they've played, which is kind of similar to everyone in the Big 12. Lots of different schemes, lots of different philosophies on the defensive side, and they're going to see a different one with a future Big 12 running mate.
What would you say is the best game plan for the Baylor defense against this BYU offense?
Take away the run and force Jaron Hall to win them this game. That's plain and simple. Don't let Tyler Algier come into Waco and win them this game. Force Jaron Hall to have to throw against Raleigh Tejada. Maybe Kalen Barnes is back this week. It seems like he will be. So if you have those two out there, JT Woods, Christian Morgan, force them to beat you with the pass game and force Jaron Hall to make tough decisions, but eliminate the run as best you can.
Yeah, that's something that Aranda did shed light on. Barnes has missed the last couple games with knee injury, right? It was a knee, he said, right?
I thought it was leg.
Lower leg or something, yeah. But regardless, it's not a season ender, and he's expected to be back this week, although they were, using the whole, we'll start, dialing him back up and just kind of take it slow and see what happens. But Aranda was sounding like Kalen Barnes will be back in the lineup, and that's just something that kind of noticed on the depth chart on Saturday, and it's like, oh, well, shoot, he's out again. So good to get an update from Miranda on that one. Anyways, appreciate and keep up the good work. That was from Scotty to close out his questions. Appreciate you, Scotty, as always. Alfanito Grayson, can you give us experience of running the line as a student?
Wow. This is a great question. So there's been a lot of questions about the Baylor line, so I'm sure people kind of want to hear, how great it was, and it was truly great. When I ran the line, I ran it pretty much every game my freshman year. I think it was much more of a thing when I was in school at Baylor, though. I mean, we all did it. Everyone wanted to run the line every single game. I ran it my last game of my senior year against Texas as well. They lost that game. But, yeah, I mean, I ran it every time I could. It's so cool. It's such an amazing experience, and it's such a unique opportunity that Baylor gives you. I just think it's one of those things that every student should definitely take advantage of if you can. You're not going to be able to do that every day. That's not something you can do, as, later in life. It's one of those things where you have an opportunity to do it as a freshman at Baylor, and you absolutely should. I love doing it with going out there with my friends and waiting in line and then running that line and then chasing up into the stands at Floyd Casey where you're literally jumping over the bottom of the stadium. Nowadays you go through the tunnel and it's nice and organized and whatnot. Ours was just a free-for-all. You're climbing over people to get into the stands. Much more dangerous than anything it is now, yet somehow there's more rules now than there were in the past.
And less people doing it. So
yeah, which is such a bummer.
Just waiting for that final opportunity, I guess, at the end of the year, that last run, like, oh, now I'll do it or something.
Well, the seniors definitely will do it when it's the last game of the year, because the last game of the year, seniors are allowed to do it. I expect every every senior to be out there and running that line, because they had to suffer through what this class would have been 2017 would have been their first year, or 2018.
2017, I guess.
2017. So they had to deal with 111.
Or no, 2018.
2018, yeah, whatever, 7-6. Now they're having a great year this year, though. So it's fun.
Yeah, well, I'm expecting those line seats to get filled up by other people here pretty soon, based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks, and rightfully so. So, if this team keeps winning, it's going to be really fun to see the confluence of events where all of a sudden the students are demanding there's, no seats, and where's the tickets? And it's be like, well, you kind of didn't show up for, half the seating for the BYU game, or, well, not BYU, but for your your initial slate of home games. So I think that'll be interesting to track.
Well, and hopefully they let them fill in those sections on the corners.
That's what I'm talking about.
I think they're going to let them fill that in, and they need to, because if you look at the student section, the normal student section, you got people standing in the concourse like crazy right now.
Yeah.
So allow everyone to move down, fill in those seats. I think it's going to look awesome for homecoming, because I believe they're going to allow that. At least I hope so. And then the berm seating was awesome too this past weekend.
That was cool to see. All right, Alpha Needle, can you give us your okay, that was that. Do either of you collect sports cards, and if so, what's the area you like to collect besides Peyton Manning or Tim Duncan rookie cards?
Alpha Neil listens to the podcast a lot. I don't collect a ton of sports cards, yet I have a ton. So passed down from generations. I have a ton of baseball cards. I'm not even a huge baseball fan, but a ton of those. And then, of course, I like just the collectibles. So, an Allen Iverson card, I have one of those. That's really cool with the jersey on it. Jason Williams back in the day, Stephon Marbury, a little Reggie Miller action in there as well. I mean, I like cards, but the area I like the best is probably the football cards, I would say.
Yeah, I collected them a lot growing up. Not so much now in the last few years. Don't have quite the disposable income to really keep a collection going, because I collect some other things outside of that. So don't really have the ability to make all of that, work. So I instead will just kind of buy a random pack here and there when I feel a little nostalgic and I come across them, which is hard to find now, because Walmart had to stop selling them during the pandemic because they were so popular. Just trading cards, they took them off the shelves. But when I would be at Cowboys camp and be at a gas station, there's a pack of brand new 2020 season cards or whatever. I'd grab a pack and just roll through them. It's fun to do that. On occasion, but I don't collect real seriously anymore.
Have you heard of NBA Top Shop?
Yeah.
What they're doing with the virtual cards?
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting thing, where it's like a highlight is your card. It's kind of cool. Some of my friends are really into that.
I just don't I'm from the generation where I need physical copy. I understand what it is, but the absence of physically having something, it just doesn't do it. It doesn't feel like I really own it. You know what I mean? And so I have a really hard time getting into the whole digital collecting, although I know it's hugely popular with Pokemon and all sorts of other stuff. I need the physical thing to really feel like I'm doing something. But yeah, that's an area that's blown up a lot. Barrel of 89, how similar is the BYU offense this year to the BU grimy offense? Will be beneficial to both defenses. They have seen it in practice.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting route that everyone's going to be talking about, and I've thought about. Yeah, it is very similar. The wide zone scheme, and there's a lot of weapons that they use in the run game. Tyler Algier being a focus. They want to establish the run, and they're going to try to establish the run against Baylor. They're going to hit you with play action. The difference for them this year is they don't have Zach Wilson, and they don't have Dax Millen either, who was their best wide receiver last year. I think their offensive line's taking a little bit of a step back, but it is very similar. They're going to run similar concepts, but I do think both offenses are going to change some things this week. And the reason for that is because they know each other so well, they know the wide zone scheme so well, that you might try to adjust a few things here and there, just add a couple wrinkles to keep the opposing defense a little off balance.
Yeah, and Aranda mentioned they got to change some of the language. There's some similarities there just from what they do up front, but that's not a big deal. That happens, and it won't be a problem to correct. Let's see here.
Well, hopefully people quit bringing up the Oklahoma State game, because people continue to bring up how, they knew Baylor's plays and all this, and it's just come on. This is going to be even worse. This is the whole former team that they were at.
Yeah.
There's just quit using that as an excuse for why Baylor lost that game.
How about Oklahoma State defense is just really good?
Right, yeah. Well, we're going to find out this week how good they are away from home.
Yeah, we'll find out another chapter. I don't think we'll know the whole tale based on what they do against Texas, because I don't want to give Texas that much credit, but yeah, we will learn some more about Oklahoma State's defense for sure. T-Rex, what exactly did the tablets say to Joseph Smith? I don't have any good joke. I don't have anything really to respond to that. But it is BYU week, so I'm not surprised to see some references. What will the ratio of husband to wife be for the BYU fans in attendance? Don't know there either. But T-Rex also does ask, does our defense finally not let the opponent score on their first drive?
Yes. They finally get a stop on the first drive of the game. And I don't think they give up any points.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and say yeah. I mean, I think, 4 weeks in a row, that would be a little bit concerning. So I would think that there's going to be a bit more of an emphasis and whatnot on that this week because not only have they given up opening drives, but they made it look kind of easy too in the way that they've given them up. Almost like West Virginia scored, and I was like, dang, if they're going to be like that this afternoon, then this could actually be a little bit, of a bigger fight. But obviously that was a flash in the pan, and Baylor's defense just need to settle in. But, yeah, you can't really afford to do that week in and week out of just like, oh, we were on edge or we were nerves and, just excited for the start, and then we settle in. It's great you settled in, but you can't go in 7-0, 7-0, 7-0, or 7-7, 7-7, in those first drives all the time. But Grayson is going to have an extra podcast to answer your other two questions. You're going to get in depth on the Joseph Smith and all that, right?
Yeah. I was thinking about previewing,
cool.
that battle.
Just covering just T-Rex's questions.
All BYU just for T-Rex.
No, T-Rex, appreciate you. And good preview this week of the Big 12, future matchup between these two teams, the Baylor Baptist and the BYU Mormons.
No doubt.
Yeah. Bear 91, Bear 1991. It felt like I was watching the Terrell Bernard of old before his injury to ISU last year. What did y'all think of his performance last Saturday? Also, where does Baylor have the biggest advantage in the game this week?
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. Terrell Bernard looked much more like himself than he has all season long. He looked really healthy, which is kind of funny because he was coming off of an injury. So it was kind of weird to see him play so well. But yeah, I think he's going to be very, very good moving forward. And this game, he's actually going to play a very important role in trying to slow down this run offense for BYU. As far as the biggest advantage for Baylor, to me, it's actually going to be in the pass game again. I think they're going to be able to challenge BYU's secondary, unlike BYU secondary has really been challenged all year. I think Gary Bohannon could have another really big day. I think Tyquan Thornton's going to be a problem, along with Drew Estrada. I just think that the passing game has opportunities to hit some big plays again, and I think that's where the biggest advantage is for the Bears.
All right, that'll do it for the mailbag this week. Thank you, Bear 1991, T-Rex, Bear Love 89, Alpha Needle, and Scotty B for the questions, and we do appreciate you as always. And now let's get into some predictions for the Big 12 this week.
Yeah, let's do it. Big 12 predictions for Week 7 of the college football season. Oklahoma State travels to take on number 25 ranked Texas. This game's on Fox at 11 a.m. Oklahoma State's coming off of the bye. Texas coming off the dramatic loss to Oklahoma. Big game coming up.
Man, that was satisfying. That Oklahoma win was unfreaking believable. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I picked them. I always go back and forth on OU and Texas when it's kind of up in the air, like last week was, of just the two teams. You didn't really know what to expect. Like, you just knew it was going to be a really good game and a really telling and meaningful game. And even knowing that, you couldn't have foreseen how crazy that game was going to be. And I thought Oklahoma was dead in the water at 28-7. I mean, the way Spencer Rattler was playing and all that, just incredible victory for Oklahoma. Not that Baylor fans need any reminder of what they're capable of. But, man, I really don't know. I think I'm going Texas here because it's at home and because I think they are going to be hungry for a bounce back. But I don't want to feel like I'm sliding Oklahoma State in any way. It's just that, they're on the road, and I think when it comes to exchanging points, which I expect is going to happen, I have more confidence that Texas is going to get that done than I think Oklahoma State's going to get that done. I don't know why. I think it's going to be a close game, but I'm leaning Texas this week. How about you?
Yeah, don't know how Texas is ranked ahead of Baylor, but I guess that's for another.
I mean, I think we know exactly why. It's a total logo thing.
But that's very weird development there. But, I think Texas is going to win this game. I think Oklahoma State's a good football team, but the problem is I think Spencer Sanders will give Texas a couple turnovers. I think the Texas offense will have some success. They'll have some big plays. They're a pretty explosive offense, especially in the run game and occasionally when Casey Thompson can hit the deep ball. But I think it will be really close. I think Oklahoma State's going to compete in this one. Their defense will keep them in it once again. But I have the Longhorns winning this one 30-27.
Yeah, I do think it will be close. If Oklahoma State wins this game, man, then, start popping the fireworks as far as like the expectations and whatnot go, because you'd be, 7-0, and you'd be, firmly in the Big 12 race, and you'd have had Texas behind you and Baylor behind you, and that'd be a fantastic thing for them. And Texas needs a bounce back. Let's face it, they can ill afford to now drop another game and have their third loss of the season already. This is an important one and a very interesting matchup.
Yeah, next up on the slate, Texas Tech travels to Kansas to take on the Kansas Jayhawks. This game is on ESPN+. Texas Tech just got ran out of their own building on homecoming. They got ran over, literally ran over by TCU. TCU threw 10 passes in that game. Kansas, on the other hand, they got ran over by Iowa State badly. And so now we're kind of in this mold where Texas Tech needs a win, and Kansas is just trying to get into the win column in conference.
Yeah, well, Texas Tech had some confidence going into last week because of the win against West Virginia. Even though that was a win they nearly blew after being up 17-0, they had to kick a late field goal to win it. But still, there was at least hey, we're rallying around the win one for the Gipper after Tyler Shutt got hurt type of thing, and their starting safeties out, and they've had a lot of injuries and whatnot, but that was an inexcusable performance given that it was homecoming, given that everybody look, there were plenty of Red Raiders fans that already felt like Matt Wells was on his way out, but there was at least a good portion that felt like being at home for homecoming, coming off of a win, TCU hasn't looked great. There's a chance to at least it's all a mirage. They're not going to win the Big 12. They're not good enough, but they can just play spoiler and have some fun and try to save Matt Wells' job, right? And then they show up to do just that, and they got their butts kicked. And so he's done. I don't know when it's finally going to be, but I don't care if they win out. That's just not an impressive football team. And they're just, I don't know. There's not an identity there. There's not, it's just what do you hold on to? You know what I mean? They're not known for their defense. They're not known for their offense. They're not known for special teams. They're not known for what they used to be known for. They're not known for anything new. They're just there. They're just a team that exists, basically. You know what I mean?
And they've gotten smashed by their two rivals in the conference.
Got smacked
with Texas
around.
And TCU.
Yeah, the two bullies just
hammered.
Pimp slapped them and made them like it. So what is so any little thing that you had to latch onto got completely wiped out last week. Yeah. So even having said that, I know there's a fear amongst some Red Raider fans who are like, oh my gosh, we lose to Kansas this week, but I'm not expecting it to get that bad. I'm going with Texas Tech in this game.
Kansas has 2 more opportunities to win games in conference play. It's this one and at the end of the year against West Virginia.
Yeah.
That's it. And so I think they're going to play hard in this game, but they're not going to beat Tech. And if they do beat Tech, Matt Wells is getting fired on the spot probably.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Texas Tech's going to win this game, and I think they're going to win it 41-20. I think they're going to win it pretty convincingly. And they're going to be 5-2. Just a complete mirage. But that game's on ESPN Plus again in Lawrence. The next game on the slate is a night game. TCU travels to Norman to take on the Oklahoma Sooners on ABC at 6:30. The Horned Frogs coming off the impressive win over Texas Tech. Oklahoma coming off the epic comeback against Texas in the Red River rivalry. Who do you got in this one?
I got to go Oklahoma after last week. I'm very curious if Caleb Williams starts this game and what that offense looks like, because it's one thing to come in and bring a little bit of Sooner magic to Dallas when they're not expecting you. But when they're game planning for you, that's an entirely different thing. So very curious situation that Lincoln Riley's got to handle. I don't know how you do anything but start Caleb Williams, though. I mean, you have to after last week, in my opinion. I know there's already rumors about Rattler and lockers and whatnot, although I haven't seen anything confirmed on that front. So if anything, that just leads me to further believe Caleb Williams is your guy moving forward. But this will be a tough test for Oklahoma, I'm sure. I'm still going Oklahoma in this game, though.
Since TCU entered the Big 12, when they've played on the road in Norman, 3 of the 4 times they've come within 4 points of beating Oklahoma. They've really pushed the Sooners when they've gone to Norman for the most part under Gary Patterson. I think Oklahoma's going to win this game, but I think it's going to be very similar to those other 3 performances. I think it's going to be very close. I think Caleb Williams is going to struggle at times. I don't think he's going to get away with some of the throws that he made against Texas, against this TCU defense, but I do think Oklahoma will have success in the run game once again. So I have the Sooners winning this one, but very, very close. I got it 24-20. The Sooners come away with the big win. Next game also at night on ESPN2. Iowa State travels to Manhattan for a sneaky road test against the Wildcats. Iowa State had a bye week, but they beat Kansas last time when they were on the field. Kansas State coming off the bye week as well after losing to Oklahoma 2 weeks ago. Who do you got in this one?
Going going Iowa State. I think this should be a fantastic game. I hate saying the same thing over and over again, but I really do. Like, the Big 12 is just so even, and even the matchups, if they're not all that even, this one is, are just unique and interesting for whatever reason, whether it be a head coaching spot or whatnot. But I'm going to go Iowa State here. That would be the team I would take, head-to-head. I understand home field and all that stuff can come into play, but I think Iowa State's going to try and make a little bit of a run with the Big 12 being as wide open as it is. They're coming off of a break. I think that Baylor kind of woke some things up and showed them some things, as did the Iowa loss. So I'm expecting kind of a retooled, more focused Iowa State team. But Skylar Thompson being back makes this fun. So this should be great. I'm going Cyclones, though.
Yeah, Skylar Thompson is going to make this a game, but I just have a hunch that this is Iowa State's quote-unquote statement game, that they're back in this conference. I think they're going to play really well. I think they're going to end up with the win, but I do think K-State will keep it close for a time. And they're going to keep fighting and put up points late and things like that. But I like the Cyclones in this one, 36-24. I think they get it done on the road. Finally, number 19, BYU travels to Waco to take on Baylor on ESPN at 2:30. BYU coming off the loss to Boise State, their first loss of the season. Baylor coming off the really good performance against West Virginia at home last weekend. Who do you got in this matchup?
I'm taking the Bears to go to 6-1, reach a bowl eligibility, and start preparing for 2 weeks in a showdown with Texas to cap off their little home stretch here. That's what I'm expecting to close out the month of October. I just like Baylor better on paper. I like them better in the eye test than what I've seen. I think BYU is plenty capable of a football team, and I definitely think they'll do some things that'll keep Baylor on their heels and keep this game going back and forth. But, if that team that showed up in Waco last week shows up in this game or something close to that, I'm taking the Bears even bigger. So, no, I'm taking Baylor to win this game.
Yeah, I'm taking Baylor to win this game as well. I think the Bears are going to have a little bit of momentum. I think BYU is actually a pretty good matchup for the Bears as well. And if they can slow down Tyler Algier just enough, I think they should have a lot of success and be able to win this game. So I got the Bears winning this one 37-21. I think they will pull away late and come up with a double-digit victory.
Well, it should be fun to talk about a potentially 6-1 football team, if not 5-2, and there will be obviously things to discuss if loss number 2 is coming their way. But I'm expecting a win. I think they keep the good times rolling, and the manner in which it's done will be interesting to see, because they've shown they can do it with the pass, they've shown they can do it with the run, they've shown they can do it with defense, they've shown they can do it with special teams. BYU is a team now that's also won in a variety of different ways, as Dave Aranda mentioned on Monday. So, again, I go back to that respect factor. I tip the talent in favor of the Bears, and I even tip the momentum in their favor as well. They're coming off of a win. BYU's coming off their first loss. So there will be an extra axe to grind for them, but I think Baylor's also very well aware of that this will be a team with an axe to grind and something to prove. So that's why I'm so confident between all that and just the familiarity going back decades between these two staffs, in a variety of different relationships, from Ron Roberts to Dave Aranda to so on and so forth. They're going to be ready to play, and I think they're the better team. So we will see this weekend officially, but a good glimpse into a future Big 12 matchup, and obviously a great opportunity for Baylor to go ahead and lock up a postseason date to be determined, but a postseason date nonetheless after missing out last year, and obviously would be in very good position over the course of the second half of the season at 6-1. That'd be a nice mark to close out these final 5 weeks or so, and some big games obviously with Texas and Oklahoma, et cetera, coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun month. There's some big home games coming up for the Bears, and just big tests in general. Yep. So we're going to get a real sense for what this team really is over the next month. We're going to know what they are by the end of the month, but a big test, an awesome homecoming. I hope the atmosphere is awesome. I hope Baylor fans, Baylor students, everyone really comes together for homecoming, gets out there, supports this team who's playing really, really well. This is a very important weekend for Dave Aranda and the staff to really continue the progression of this football program.
Yes, it is. So we will see what happens on Saturday. Of course, I'll have articles, as Grayson will have articles all week long on the site, and we'll have various things on the message boards and the radio show and all of that. So I'll be around all week on Sikkim 365 Radio. at 3 o'clock along with Smokey and Paul, plus some writing here and there. And Grayson will be all over the website as well. And, of course, the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to that, Sikkim 365 Sports, please do that. So we try to make our way to 15,000 subscribers. It'd be great if we could reach that point here over the course of the remaining season. So if you haven't done so, please do so to support the show and the site. And until next time, for Grayson Grunhafer, also Jack McKenzie and Armstrong Sims behind the scenes, I'm Craig Smoke, and this has been the Bearcast on Sikkim 365 Radio and Sikkim365.com.